Stoicism, the art of not letting the world hurt you. The modern world places the human mind under constant pressure. Information arrives without pause. Expectations multiply. Opinions are delivered instantly and judged publicly. Uncertainty is no longer occasional, it is permanent. Many people move through their days, tense, reactive, and quietly exhausted, not because life is uniquely cruel, but because their inner world is left unguarded. Stoicism begins with a simple recognition. Life will not arrange itself around your comfort. Events will unfold without asking for your approval. People will misunderstand you, disappoint you, and sometimes act unjustly. Your body will age, plans will fail, loss will arrive without warning. None of this is personal. It is the nature of existing in a world governed by forces larger than any individual. The danger is not that these things happen. The danger is allowing them to dominate the inner life. Most suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the judgments attached to them, the resistance offered, and the belief that life owes us a different outcome. When the mind demands control where none is possible, it creates its own prison. Stoicism is not emotional numbness, and it is not withdrawal from life. It is the discipline of learning where your responsibility truly lies and where it does not. It teaches how to participate fully in the world without surrendering inner stability to every disturbance. It trains the mind to meet difficulty without collapse, success without arrogance, and uncertainty without fear. This is not a philosophy for ideal conditions. It was formed in exile, illness, political instability, and personal loss. It speaks to those who must live within chaos rather than wait for calm. What it offers is not protection from pain, but protection from being broken by it. Most people live as if their peace depends on events aligning in their favor. When things go well, they feel stable. When something goes wrong, their inner state collapses. This pattern feels normal, even unavoidable, but Stoicism begins by challenging it at its root. It asks you to look closely at where your power actually ends and where you have been falsely extending it. There are things in this life that belong to you and things that never will. Your judgments, your intentions, your choices, and the effort you apply in each moment are yours. They cannot be taken from you unless you surrender them. Everything else operates outside your command. Other people's opinions, the behavior of institutions, economic conditions, health outcomes, timing, recognition, and even the final results of your actions all exist beyond your authority. Confusing these two domains is the primary source of unnecessary suffering. Modern anxiety thrives on this confusion. The mind constantly rehearses futures it cannot control and replays past moments it cannot change. It tries to manage how others will react, how events should unfold, how life ought to behave. Each attempt fails, not because the person is weak, but because the task itself is impossible. Stoicism does not scold you for wanting stability. It simply shows you where stability can realistically be found. When you invest your emotional well-being in outcomes, you place your peace in fragile hands. A single message, a delayed response, a market shift, or a careless remark can destabilize your entire day. This is not resilience. It is dependence. The Stoic response is not to withdraw from effort or ambition, but to relocate the source of your satisfaction. You are responsible for acting with reason, fairness, and self-control. You are not responsible for how the world receives that action. Anger follows the same pattern. People become angry when reality refuses to obey their expectations. They believe something should not have happened, that someone should have acted differently, that life violated an unspoken agreement. The Stoic perspective removes this illusion. No such agreement exists. People act according to their character and understanding. Events unfold according to causes that do not revolve around your preferences. Anger, then, is not a signal of injustice alone. It is often a sign of mistaken assumptions about control. This does not mean tolerating wrongdoing or injustice passively. Stoicism never argues for indifference to moral action. It draws a sharper line. You are responsible for responding justly and rationally. You are not entitled to guaranteed success or immediate correction of the world. When action is guided by reason rather than emotional reactivity, it becomes steadier, more precise, and less corrosive to the one who acts. Social pressure intensifies this confusion in modern life. Comparison is constant. Metrics of success are public and relentless. People measure their worth against visibility, approval, and accumulation. This creates a fragile identity built on external validation. Stoicism dismantles this structure. Worth is not assigned by an audience. Character is not measured by applause. A calm and disciplined mind does not rise or fall with attention. When you allow others to determine your inner state, you surrender sovereignty over your own mind. Praise inflates you. Criticism wounds you. Silence unsettles you. The Stoic position is not to deny feedback, but to evaluate it rationally. If criticism is accurate, it becomes useful information. If it is false, it requires no disturbance. In neither case does it justify emotional upheaval. Fear of the future operates through the same mechanism. The mind seeks certainty where none exists. It demands reassurance that plans will work, that effort will be rewarded, that loss will not arrive. Stoicism responds by removing false promises. The future is uncertain by nature. Waiting for certainty before finding peace is a losing strategy. Peace is cultivated through preparedness, not prediction. Preparedness means aligning yourself with what is always available. The capacity to respond thoughtfully, to endure difficulty without collapse, and to act in accordance with your values regardless of outcome. When this foundation is secure, uncertainty loses much of its power. The future may remain unknown, but it no longer feels threatening because your stability does not depend on specific results. This shift requires discipline. It is not achieved through affirmations or momentary insight. The mind has habits built over years, reinforced daily by a culture that equates happiness with control and success with external dominance. Stoicism asks for repeated attention to where your effort is placed. Each time you catch yourself worrying about what others think, rehearsing outcomes, or resenting events, you are given an opportunity to redirect that energy. This redirection is not suppression. Emotions are not enemies to be crushed. They are signals produced by judgments. Change the judgment, and the emotion changes with it. When you truly understand that an external event cannot harm your character unless you allow it, the emotional charge weakens. Calm becomes less an achievement and more a byproduct of clear perception. The world will continue to be unstable. Systems will remain imperfect. People will act out of fear, ignorance, and self-interest. Stoicism does not promise insulation from this reality. It offers something more realistic and more durable, an inner posture that remains steady regardless of external turbulence. To practice this is to live with fewer illusions and more clarity. You stop demanding that life feel fair at all times. You stop measuring yourself by standards you do not control. You stop exhausting yourself by resisting what cannot be changed. In their place, you cultivate attentiveness, restraint, and rational judgment. This is where the art of not letting the world hurt you truly begins, not by building walls against life, but by understanding where life ends and your responsibility begins. Once the boundary of control becomes clearer, a deeper challenge emerges. Even when people accept that they cannot control events, they often remain enslaved by their own desires. They are not ruled only by circumstances, but by the need for things to go a certain way in order to feel whole. Stoicism identifies this as a quieter and more persistent source of suffering. Desire, in itself, is not condemned. The problem arises when desire hardens into attachment. When you tell yourself that happiness requires a specific outcome, a particular person, recognition, comfort, or security, you hand your inner balance to something that can be taken away. The modern world encourages this dependency relentlessly. It teaches that fulfillment is found in accumulation, visibility, and constant stimulation. Stoicism moves in the opposite direction, not out of contempt for pleasure, but out of respect for freedom. Attachment narrows the mind. It makes every obstacle feel like a personal threat, and every delay seeming unbearable. When your identity becomes entangled with roles, achievements, or relationships, even minor disruptions feel like an assault on the self. Stoic discipline works to loosen this grip. It asks you to examine what you are clinging to and why, not to deny affection or ambition, but to ensure that your sense of worth is not hostage to conditions beyond your command. Ego plays a central role in this process. Much emotional pain comes not from harm, but from perceived insult. A lack of acknowledgement, a disagreement, or a failure to be respected can provoke disproportionate reactions because the ego interprets these moments as threats to identity. Stoicism treats the ego with suspicion. It reminds you that reputation exists only in the minds of others, and that those minds are unstable and unreliable judges. When you seek validation, you invite volatility into your inner life. Approval becomes a temporary relief, not a stable foundation. Disapproval becomes a wound that lingers longer than the event itself. The Stoic alternative is quieter and more demanding. It replaces external affirmation with internal standards. The question shifts from how you are seen to how you are acting. Are your choices guided by reason? Are they aligned with fairness, restraint, and integrity? These are measures that remain accessible regardless of circumstance. This inward orientation changes how success is defined. In a culture that celebrates outcomes, Stoicism places emphasis on conduct. You may act with care and still fail. You may behave honorably and still be misunderstood. None of this diminishes the value of the action itself. When success is tied exclusively to results, disappointment is inevitable. When success is tied to character, it becomes repeatable in every moment. Emotional mastery is often misunderstood as emotional suppression. Stoicism does not teach the elimination of feeling. It teaches the examination of judgment. Emotions arise when the mind interprets something as good or bad, beneficial or threatening. By refining these interpretations, emotional intensity naturally moderates. You do not become cold, you become measured. This discipline requires honesty. It demands that you observe your reactions without defensiveness. When you feel envy, resentment, or craving, Stoicism does not ask you to feel guilty. It asks you to inquire, what belief is operating here? What am I assuming must be present for me to be at ease? Often the answer reveals an unnecessary dependency. Modern life amplifies desire through constant exposure. Images of idealized lives, curated success, and endless options stimulate dissatisfaction. The Stoic response is not withdrawal from society, but selective engagement. You learn to limit what enters the mind, not out of fear, but out of care. Just as the body is affected by diet, the mind is shaped by what it consumes repeatedly. Daily discipline becomes essential here. Stoicism is not practiced only in moments of crisis. It is practiced in small decisions that accumulate over time. Choosing restraint over impulse, choosing reflection over reaction, choosing long-term steadiness over short-term relief. These choices are often invisible to others, which is precisely why they matter. When desire is moderated, fear loses much of its grip. Fear often arises from the possibility of losing what one is attached to. If identity is bound to status, loss becomes terrifying. If self-worth is grounded in character, loss becomes painful, but not destabilizing. Stoicism does not promise immunity from grief or disappointment. It offers a way to experience them without collapse. There is also a moral dimension to this discipline. When ego and desire dominate, people justify harmful behavior in the pursuit of comfort or recognition. Stoicism insists that virtue is non-negotiable. No external gain excuses internal corruption. This stance can feel demanding in a world that rewards compromise, yet it is precisely this consistency that produces inner coherence. To live this way is not to become detached from humanity. It is to engage more honestly with it. You no longer manipulate for approval or compete for validation. You act according to principle, even when it is inconvenient. This creates a form of quiet confidence that does not announce itself and does not require defense. Over time, the mind becomes less reactive. Insults lose their sting. Delays feel manageable. Praise becomes pleasant, but unnecessary. Desire still arises, but it no longer dictates behavior. You are not free from feeling. You are free from being driven blindly by it. This freedom is subtle. It does not resemble excitement or triumph. It feels like space. Space to choose, to endure, to act without inner turbulence. In a world that constantly pulls attention outward, this inward stability becomes a form of resistance, not loud, not confrontational, but firm. This is the Stoic understanding of strength, not dominance over others, but governance of oneself. Even with discipline, restraint, and clarity, life will still deliver moments that test endurance. Loss arrives without negotiation. Injustice appears without warning. Effort does not always meet reward. Stoicism does not soften these facts. It refuses false consolation. Instead, it prepares the mind to meet them without bitterness or collapse. Suffering becomes intolerable when it is interpreted as a personal injustice inflicted by the universe. Many people believe, often unconsciously, that if they act correctly, life should respond in kind. When this expectation is violated, resentment forms. Stoicism dismantles this expectation entirely. The world does not distribute outcomes based on merit. Events follow chains of cause that are indifferent to personal virtue. This is not pessimism, it is realism. Understanding this removes a significant portion of unnecessary pain. You stop asking why this happened to you in particular. You stop interpreting hardship as a verdict on your worth. Difficulty becomes a condition of existence rather than a personal failure. This shift does not eliminate grief or frustration, but it prevents them from turning into despair. Injustice presents a different challenge. To accept that the world is imperfect is not to excuse wrongdoing. Stoicism draws a careful distinction between acceptance of reality and passivity. You are obligated to act justly where action is possible. You are not obligated to guarantee results. When injustice occurs, the Stoic response is measured engagement, not moral outrage that consumes the self. Outrage often feels righteous, but it is frequently self-indulgent. It exhausts the mind and clouds judgment. Stoicism favors steady resistance grounded in reason. It asks what can be done without allowing anger to corrupt the actor. This approach preserves dignity even when outcomes remain uncertain. Impermanence underlies all of this. Everything that exists is in the process of changing or ending. Relationships evolve or dissolve. Bodies weaken, circumstances shift. Attempts to deny this reality create constant anxiety. Stoicism does not encourage morbid fixation on loss, but clear-eyed awareness of transience. This awareness sharpens attention. When you understand that time is limited and conditions are temporary, trivial concerns lose importance. Petty conflicts, status games, and endless accumulation appear less compelling. What remains is the question of how you are using the time that is actually yours. Mortality is central to this reflection. Death is not treated as an abstraction, but as a certainty that frames all action. Avoiding this fact does not protect peace, it erodes it. When death is ignored, people live as if time is infinite, delaying integrity and postponing clarity. Stoicism brings death into awareness, not to provoke fear, but to cultivate seriousness about how one lives. When you accept that life is finite, you become less tolerant of distraction and pretense. You become more attentive to the quality of your choices. This does not produce urgency or panic. It produces focus. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions to live according to your principles. Fate in Stoic thought is not resignation. It is recognition of necessity. Certain events will occur regardless of preference. Fighting this reality creates internal friction. Aligning with it does not mean approving of everything that happens. It means cooperating with what cannot be changed, while directing effort where it still matters. This alignment creates a distinctive calm, not indifference, but steadiness. When setbacks occur, they are met without surprise. When loss arrives, it is mourned without self-pity. When success appears, it is received without attachment. The mind remains anchored in conduct rather than circumstance. This is especially relevant in a world that encourages constant emotional exposure. News cycles amplify outrage. Social platforms reward reaction. Stoicism asks for selectivity. Not every event requires your emotional participation. Attention is a limited resource. How you allocate it shapes your inner life. There is also humility in this stance. You recognize your smallness within a vast system of causes. This does not diminish responsibility, it refines it. You act where you can, accept where you cannot, and remain aware of the limits of influence. This humility protects against both despair and arrogance. Over time, endurance becomes a practice skill. You learn that discomfort does not require escape. Uncertainty does not require immediate resolution. Silence does not require filling. The mind grows familiar with stillness, and in that stillness, clarity emerges. Stoicism does not promise happiness as a permanent state. It offers something more durable: composure, a way of standing upright in a world that does not bend to preference, a capacity to face life without illusion and without collapse. This is not a dramatic transformation. It is gradual, often unnoticed by others. The change is internal. Fewer reactions, fewer regrets, a steadier presence in moments that once provoked turmoil. In accepting impermanence, injustice, and mortality without surrendering virtue, you cultivate a form of freedom that does not depend on conditions. This freedom does not remove pain, but it prevents pain from defining you. This is the quiet strength Stoicism develops, not by denying the world's weight, but by learning how to carry it without being crushed. Stoicism does not offer an escape from life, and it does not promise relief from every hardship. What it offers is orientation, a way to stand within uncertainty without losing coherence, a way to participate in the world without allowing it to dominate the inner life. This is not achieved through slogans or temporary inspiration, but through sustained attention to how judgments are formed and how choices are made. The work is ongoing. Each day presents moments where impulse competes with restraint, where resentment tempts the mind, where fear seeks control over what cannot be secured. Stoic practice is simply the repeated decision to meet these moments with clarity, rather than habit. Over time, this repetition reshapes the mind. Calm becomes more available. Reaction slows. The space between event and response widens. This path does not require withdrawal from responsibility or ambition. It requires honesty about what truly belongs to you. When effort is guided by reason and grounded in virtue, outcomes lose their power to destabilize. You act fully, but you are not consumed by the results. You care deeply, but you are not enslaved by attachment. In a world that profits from agitation and distraction, this way of living is quiet and often unnoticed. Yet it is precisely this quiet that gives it strength. A person who governs themselves cannot be easily manipulated. A mind that accepts impermanence cannot be easily shaken. A character rooted in principle does not depend on constant reassurance. Stoicism asks nothing more than this, that you take responsibility for your own judgments and release the rest without resentment. When this becomes habitual, the world may still be demanding, but it no longer feels personally hostile. You move through it with steadiness rather than resistance. If this perspective resonates, this channel exists as a place to continue that discipline. Not for motivation, but for reflection. Not to escape life, but to meet it with greater clarity and composure.